He always said, "It's just work." Those words, repeated for years on end, were the mantra of Robert, my partner for almost a decade. I, Natalie, at 68 years old, always believed him. After all, after a lifetime of ups and downs, of losses and new beginnings, trust was the most precious pillar I sought in a relationship. We lived in a charming Boston suburb, our home full of memories, laughter, and, I thought, love. Robert, at 72, was a retired businessman, but always busy with his projects and meetings. I would see him leave every morning, impeccable in his suit, and he would return late at night, with the same excuse. "It's just work." Dear business. The routine was predictable, almost comforting. I would prepare dinner, read my book on the porch, and await his return. But in recent months, a cold shadow began to stretch over our home. Small lies, flimsy excuses, an evasive look when I asked about his day. My instinct, sharpened by decades of experience, whispered that something was wrong. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to my age, to my fertile imagination, to the loneliness that sometimes embraced me. I convinced myself it was just the weariness of age, the natural melancholy of someone who has lived a lot. But the truth is that a woman's intuition never ages, and mine was screaming. Until one night, curiosity, or perhaps desperation, led me down a path I never imagined I would take. Robert had forgotten his cell phone on the coffee table. A small vibration caught my attention, a message. He always said, "It's just work." Until I unlocked his phone and saw a conversation with a coded name. The name was Phoenix. My heart pounded. Phoenix? What kind of name was that? And why would Robert have a coded contact? A pang of fear and betrayal hit me. I felt my blood run cold, my breath catch. It was as if the ground were opening beneath my feet, swallowing all the security I thought I had built. The image of Robert, the man I loved and trusted, began to distort before my eyes, transforming into a stranger. The phone screen, once a harmless object, now seemed like a portal to an abyss of secrets. The bluish light reflected in my trembling hands as I hesitated. Should I invade his privacy? But the doubt was already planted, and the seed of distrust had germinated. I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening before uncertainty consumed me completely. If you've ever felt the earth shake beneath your feet, if you've ever distrusted the one you loved most, then you understand the anguish that consumed me. If this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you are listening to this story from. I need to know I'm not alone on this journey of painful discovery. My life with Robert was not a fairy tale, but it was real, and I valued it immensely. We met at a charity event in Chicago almost 10 years ago. I had moved there after losing my first husband, David, to a sudden illness. The grief of widowhood was a heavy burden, and I didn't expect to find love again. Life, I thought, had already given and taken enough from me. But Robert, with his charming way and apparent stability, brought me back to life. He was a man who seemed to understand the importance of loyalty and honesty, values I cherished above all else, forged in years of experience and challenges. I had built my life on transparency. After David's death, I promised myself I would never again live in a fog of uncertainty. Robert knew my story, my deepest scars. He promised me a safe harbor, a place where I could finally rest my heart and soul. And I believed him. I believed every word, every gesture of affection, every "I love you" whispered in my ear during long winter nights. Our home in Boston, with its well-kept garden and the fireplace that crackled on cold nights, was the symbol of our union, a refuge. My children, now adults with their own lives in different states, visited us on holidays, bringing with them the joy and noise that filled the rooms. They liked Robert, considered him a good man, a worthy companion for their mother. I was proud of the family we had built, of the peace I had finally found. But now, the word Phoenix on Robert's phone screen threatened to collapse everything, like a house of cards. That name, so enigmatic, haunted me. Who was Phoenix? A colleague? An old flame? The possibility of betrayal, especially at this stage of my life, was devastating. I had already faced loss, loneliness, the rebuilding of a life from scratch. But betrayal was a different wound, one that corroded the soul, questioned the very essence of what I believed. I felt foolish, a naive old woman who had fallen for an emotional trick, but the Natalie who had overcome so many adversities, who had raised children alone and rebuilt her life, would not surrender without a fight. I needed the truth, no matter how painful. My dignity, my legacy demanded it. With my hands still trembling, but with a growing determination that sprang from the depths of my soul, I picked up Robert's phone. He was never very good with passwords, and I knew his birth date was the most likely combination. I typed the numbers, and the screen opened, revealing a world I never imagined existed. The conversation with Phoenix was at the top of the recent messages list. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, an incessant drumming that echoed the panic that was beginning to invade me. The message exchange was frequent, intimate, but strangely formal. There were no obvious flirtations, no declarations of love, but a veiled complicity, a web of secrets that sent shivers down my spine. Robert spoke of our plans, our secrets, and what we'll do when all this is over. With each line read, the image of my Robert, the man I knew and loved, crumbled a little more, like an old photograph fading in the sun. I felt invaded, violated in my trust, but I couldn't stop. The need to understand, to unravel that enigma, was stronger than any guilt or hesitation. Morbid curiosity, mixed with growing terror, led me to search for the name Phoenix. I used the tablet Robert gave me last Christmas, a gift that now seemed a cruel irony. I opened the browser and typed the name. What I found left me in shock, paralyzed. When I searched, I discovered it was a person who died 10 years ago. The article was from a local New York newspaper, the New York Daily News, dated a decade ago. Tragic accident takes the life of young artist Sarah Jenkins, known by her pseudonym Phoenix. Sarah Jenkins, a promising artist, deceased in a car accident on a rural road in upstate New York, returning from an exhibition. The news was tragic, but there was nothing supernatural or mysterious about her death, at least not in public reports. But the messages on Robert's phone were not from a man grieving a distant friend. They were messages of complicity, of future plans, of shared secrets. Our plans, our secrets. What we'll do when all this is over? What did all this mean? And how did Robert, a retired businessman from Boston, fit into the life of a young New York artist dead for 10 years? With each new piece of the puzzle, more questions arose, and Robert's image became increasingly dark and unknown. I wasn't just dealing with a betrayal, but with a mystery that defied logic, science, and reality itself. What was Robert hiding? And why was he communicating with the dead? With each new discovery, Robert's image crumbled a little more, revealing layers of a man I didn't know. The photograph of Sarah Jenkins, the Phoenix, with the dedication to my Robert with love, was irrefutable proof of an intimate relationship, a connection to the art gallery in New York, the past he always hid. Everything fit into a narrative of deception and secrecy. I felt like a character in a mystery novel. But the protagonist was me, and the mystery was my own life. I began to subtly test Robert. During dinner, I casually mentioned an art exhibition in New York that I had read about in the newspaper. Do you remember any interesting galleries there, dear? You lived there for a while, didn't you? Robert hesitated for a moment, his gaze evasive. Oh, yes, a few. But it's been so long, Natalie. I don't remember the names. His voice was calm, but I could feel a subtle tension in his shoulders, a stiffening in his posture. He was lying, and I knew it. On another occasion, I left the tablet open on the page of the article about Sarah Jenkins's death, with her photo prominently displayed. Robert entered the room, looked at the screen, and his expression became unreadable for an instant. He cleared his throat, closed the tablet, and put it back on the table. Reading old news, dear? Is there nothing new in the world? His tone was light, but his eyes avoided mine. He knew I was investigating, that I was getting closer to the truth. The tension between us became palpable, an elephant in the room that neither of us dared to name. Our conversations became superficial, full of uncomfortable silences. I watched him, he watched me, each waiting for the other's move. The house, once a refuge, now seemed like a minefield, where every word, every gesture, could trigger an explosion. I couldn't sleep anymore. The nights were filled with thoughts, with scenarios, with unanswered questions. Who was Sarah Jenkins to Robert? And why was he communicating with her 10 years after her death? I had evidence, clues, a theory that, however absurd it seemed, was the only one that made sense. Robert was not communicating with a ghost. He was communicating with someone using the name Phoenix. Someone who was alive and who had a deep connection to Robert's past and to the deceased Sarah Jenkins. The thumbnail phrase, he always said, "It's just work," until I unlocked his phone and saw a conversation with a coded name. When I searched, I discovered it was a person who died 10 years ago, now had a new and terrifying meaning. I was ready for the confrontation, to unravel Robert's last secret, but I knew the truth could destroy everything. The tension in the house was unbearable. I knew I couldn't put off the confrontation any longer. Robert came home as usual, with his tired smile and the usual excuse about a long day. But this time I wouldn't let him escape. I waited for him to sit in his favorite armchair, newspaper in hand, and then approached him, holding Sarah Jenkins's photograph and the tablet with the newspaper article. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady, imbued with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "Robert," I began, and he lowered the newspaper, his eyes meeting mine. For the first time in a long time, there was no evasion in his gaze, just a somber resignation. "We need to talk. And this time I want the truth, the whole truth." I placed the photograph and the tablet on the coffee table, clearly visible. His eyes fixed on Sarah's image, and a heavy sigh escaped his lips. "Phoenix," he murmured, almost inaudible. "Yes, Phoenix," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Sarah Jenkins, the artist who died 10 years ago, and with whom you've been exchanging secret messages, using a coded name." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving a distant memory. When he opened them, there was pain and regret in them. "It's not what you think, Natalie," he tried. But I interrupted him. "I'm not thinking, Robert. I'm investigating. And what I've discovered is that you've been lying to me for years. About your past, about your meetings, about who you really are." He stood up, walking to the window, his back to me. "I'm sorry, Natalie. I should have told you a long time ago." The silence stretched, heavy, as I waited. "Phoenix is not Sarah Jenkins," he finally said, his voice choked. "Phoenix is Emily, Sarah's younger sister. She's also an artist, and she uses the pseudonym to honor her sister's memory. And the messages are about Sarah's legacy. My world, which was already upside down, spun even more. Emily, not a ghost, but a living person. And a legacy." The complication unfolded in a new and unexpected direction. Robert finally turned to me, his eyes teary, the mask of the unshakable businessman completely gone. "I had an affair with Sarah, Natalie," he confessed, and the word affair echoed in the room, cold and sharp. "It was over 30 years ago, when I was a gallery owner in New York, and she was a promising young artist. I helped her develop her pseudonym, Phoenix. It was an intense but complicated relationship. I was married at the time, and she was much younger." The confession hit me like a punch to the gut, but somehow it didn't surprise me. A woman's intuition, after all, never fails. "After Sarah died 10 years ago, her family contacted me," Robert continued, his voice choked. "Emily, her sister, was devastated. She found some of Sarah's diaries, where she talked about our relationship and about a secret art project she was developing. A project that, if launched, could revolutionize the art market and bring a fortune to her family. Emily asked for my help to realize this project, to honor Sarah's memory. And you accepted," I said, anger beginning to simmer in my veins. "You agreed to work with the sister of the woman you cheated on me with, and you hid everything from me for almost a decade." "Why, Robert? Why the lies?" He approached, reaching out to me, but I recoiled. "I was ashamed, Natalie. Ashamed of my past. Ashamed of having deceived you. I love you, and I didn't want to lose you. I thought if I told you about Sarah, you would leave me." This was the climax of our story, the moment of truth. The betrayal was not just with a dead woman, but with the living Natalie, the woman who had trusted him, who had built a life with him. Poetic justice manifested in Robert's pain, in his confession, in his vulnerability. But his pain did not erase mine. "You left me no choice, Robert," I said, feeling tears stream down my face. "You destroyed trust, the most important pillar of our relationship. And without trust, there is no love. There is no us." The decision was painful, but undeniable. I couldn't live in a house built on lies, with a man who had hidden a lifetime of secrets. "I want a divorce, Robert," I said, and the phrase, which once seemed impossible, now sounded like liberation. The pain was immense, but the clarity was even greater. I was no longer the naive Natalie who had allowed herself to be deceived. I was the Natalie who had faced the truth, no matter how painful, and who was ready to rebuild her life, once again, on solid foundations of honesty and self-respect. The months that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and bureaucracy. The divorce was amicable as much as possible. Robert, with his evident guilt, did not contest my demands. The house in Boston, our refuge, was sold, and I decided to move to Florida, to a small beachfront apartment, closer to my eldest daughter, Sarah. Her name, ironically, brought me a comfort I hadn't expected. The pain of Robert's betrayal still throbbed, but with each passing day, the wound healed a little more. I had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of truth, transparency, and the need to trust my own instincts. The 68-year-old Natalie who had discovered the hidden message on Robert's phone was a different woman from the Natalie who had fallen in love with him. Stronger, wiser, more aware of her own worth. In my new apartment, with the ocean breeze coming through the window, I started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned decades ago. The vibrant colors on the canvas were a reflection of my soul, which, despite the scars, still pulsed with life and hope. My children visited me frequently, and I felt surrounded by love and support. They saw me as a hero, a woman who had faced adversity with dignity and courage. One day, I received a letter from Emily, Sarah Jenkins's sister. She told me that the art project had been a resounding success, and that the fortune raised was being used to create a foundation to support young artists in Sarah's memory. She also thanked me for having freed Robert from his secret, and for allowing the truth to come out. The letter brought me a sense of peace. Justice, after all, had been served, not just for me, but for Sarah and her legacy. Looking at the horizon, at the sun setting over the ocean, I knew that life, despite its twists and turns, always offers the chance for a new beginning. The story of Robert and Phoenix, of lies and secrets, had taught me that truth, however painful, is always the path to true freedom. And that love, true love, can only flourish on a foundation of honesty and trust. If you, like me, have faced the pain of betrayal and the complexity of secrets, know that the strength to start over is within you. Share your story in the comments, like if this narrative resonated with you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming and resilience.